My name is Morgan Reynolds, and at 28 years old, I thought I had my life figured out. Working as a clinical psychologist, I lived comfortably but not extravagantly, distanced from my father James and his new family. Then came the call that changed everything. My billionaire grandfather Harold had suffered a heart attack in Greece, and my father had abandoned him there to continue his luxury vacation. What happened after my grandfather returned home shattered our family forever, exposing betrayals I never thought possible, even from my father. Before I dive into this shocking family drama that forever changed my life, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe to hear more unbelievable but true family stories like mine. It was a Wednesday afternoon like any other. I was in my office, finishing up a therapy session with a client struggling with abandonment issues, when my phone buzzed repeatedly. I typically keep it on silent during sessions, but the persistent vibration caught my attention. 3 missed calls from an international number. "I'm sorry, but we'll need to wrap up a few minutes early today," I told my client, trying to maintain my professional composure despite the growing sense that something was wrong. After escorting my client out, I returned to my desk and called the number back. A woman with a crisp British accent answered immediately. "Is this Morgan Reynolds?" she asked. "Yes, this is she." "Who am I speaking with?" "My name is Evelyn Clark. I'm your grandfather Harold Reynolds' executive assistant. I'm afraid there's been an emergency." My grandfather. A man I hadn't seen in nearly a decade, not since my parents' bitter divorce had fractured our family. I remembered him as a tall, imposing figure who somehow always smelled of expensive cologne and peppermints. "What kind of emergency?" I asked, my throat suddenly dry. "Mr. Reynolds has suffered a heart attack while on vacation in Santorini, Greece. He's currently stabilized at Santorini General Hospital, but his condition is serious." I sat down heavily in my chair. "I'm sorry to hear that, but why are you calling me? Isn't my father with him?" There was a pause on the line. "That's part of the reason for my call, Ms. Reynolds. Your father was indeed with Mr. Reynolds when the incident occurred, along with his wife Victoria and their son. However, they've left the island. Your father claimed there was a business emergency that required his immediate attention." "Left? You mean they abandoned my grandfather in a foreign hospital after he had a heart attack?" The words felt unreal coming out of my mouth. "I'm afraid so. Mr. Reynolds specifically asked me to contact you. He's requesting your presence, if possible." I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. My grandfather teaching me chess when I was 7. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. How he'd attended every one of my school plays despite running a global business empire. Before my parents' divorce tore everything apart. What exactly happened, Ms. Clark? They were on a private yacht tour when Mr. Reynolds began experiencing chest pains. They docked immediately and got him to the hospital. The doctors say he suffered a moderate myocardial infarction. He's stable but weak. After ensuring he was admitted, your father and his family checked out of their hotel and flew to Mykonos to continue their vacation. The casual cruelty of it stunned me. And he just left his father there? Alone. Yes. Mr. Reynolds insisted I not disturb them further and asked me to contact you instead. Her voice softened. "He speaks of you often, Ms. Reynolds." That revelation hit me hard. All these years, I'd assumed he'd chosen my father's side, written me off along with my mother. "I'll come," I said, the decision making itself. "I need to book flights." Mr. Reynolds anticipated your response. "There's a ticket waiting for you at JFK, first class, departing at 9 p.m. tonight. A car will collect you 3 hours before departure." I glanced at my watch. That gave me just 4 hours to rearrange my entire life. "Thank you, Ms. Clark. I'll be ready." After hanging up, I immediately called my office manager to clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks, citing a family emergency. Then I called my boyfriend, Michael. "I need to go to Greece," I said when he answered, the reality of the situation finally hitting me. "Greece? What's happened?" Michael's voice was concerned but steady, one of the things I'd always loved about him. I explained the situation as I threw clothes into a suitcase, putting the phone on speaker. "Your father just left him there." Michael sounded as incredulous as I felt. "That's beyond cold." "I know. I can't even process it right now." I paused. a silk blouse dangling from my hand. What kind of person does that to their own father? The same kind who barely acknowledged his daughter's existence for the past decade, Michael said gently. Do you want me to come with you? The offer was tempting, but I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. No, I need to do this alone. Besides, you can't just abandon your patients either. Unlike some people, I actually consider abandonment a serious issue, he said, trying to lighten the mood. As I continued packing, my phone dinged with a text message from my father. Heard Evelyn contacted you. No need to fly out. Dad's fine, just being dramatic as usual. We'll be back in a few days. The casual dismissal of his father's heart attack made my blood boil. I didn't bother responding. Closing my suitcase, I stood in the middle of my bedroom, suddenly overwhelmed. I was flying across the world to help a grandfather I hadn't spoken to in years, potentially confronting my father and his new family, all while trying to navigate international healthcare. My hands trembled slightly as I zipped my toiletry bag. Michael must have sensed my anxiety through the silence. Morgan, you've got this. You're the strongest person I know. Call me when you land, okay? His confidence steadied me. Okay. 3 hours later, I sat in the back of a black town car headed to JFK, watching the familiar New York skyline fade behind me as I journeyed toward an uncertain reunion with the fragments of my broken family. The plane touched down in Santorini just as the morning sun was casting a golden glow across the iconic white buildings and blue domes. Under different circumstances, I would have been captivated by the breathtaking views of the caldera and the sparkling Aegean Sea. Instead, my mind was focused solely on reaching the hospital. A driver was waiting for me at the arrivals gate, holding a sign with my name. He navigated the narrow, winding roads with practiced ease, eventually pulling up to a modest white building with Nu Omicron Sigma Omicron Kappa Omicron Mu Epsilon Iota Omicron written across the entrance. Evelyn Clark was waiting in the lobby, immediately recognizable despite never having met her in person. Tall and slender with immaculately styled silver hair, she carried herself with the composed efficiency of someone who had spent decades managing complicated situations. Ms. Reynolds, thank you for coming so quickly. She extended her hand. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. How is he? I asked, skipping pleasantries. Stable, but the doctors are concerned about the strain a long journey might put on his heart. She led me through sterile hallways. There's something you should know before we go in. Your grandfather doesn't know that I contacted you against your father's wishes. James explicitly instructed the hospital staff not to reach out to any other family members. My steps faltered. Why would he do that? I believe that's a question best answered by your grandfather. Evelyn's expression was carefully neutral, but I could sense there was more she wasn't telling me. Outside a private room, she paused. He looks frilier than you might remember, but he's still very much himself. Nothing could have prepared me for the sight of Harold Reynolds lying in that hospital bed. The powerful titan of industry who had once dominated boardrooms and commanded respect with his mere presence now looked diminished, tethered to machines monitoring his vital signs. His once robust frame seemed to barely make an impression under the thin hospital blanket. But when he turned and saw me standing in the doorway, his eyes, the same deep blue as my own, lit up with recognition and what looked startlingly like joy. Morgan. His voice was raspy but strong. Is that really you? I moved to his bedside, suddenly unsure. Did I hug him? Take his hand? 10 years of silence stretched between us like a chasm. He made the decision for me, reaching out to grasp my hand with surprising strength. You came. Of course I came, I said, surprised to feel tears threatening. When I heard what happened, that you were abandoned in a foreign hospital after suffering a heart attack, I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Yes, that's exactly what I heard. Harold sighed, wincing slightly with the movement. Your father said he had an urgent situation to attend to. In Mykonos? At a 5-star resort. The bitterness I'd been suppressing bubbled to the surface. I saw their social media posts, grandfather. Victoria posted pictures of them on a yacht yesterday. Something flashed in Harold's eyes, hurt, anger, resignation, before he carefully composed his expression. James has always had different priorities. Different priorities? He left his father alone in a hospital after a heart attack. That's not different priorities. That's... Let's not waste our reunion on him, Harold interrupted gently. Tell me about you. Evelyn says you're a psychologist now. I wanted to press the issue, but the pleading look in his eyes stopped me. Clinical psychologist, yes. I have a private practice in New York. For the next hour, Harold asked me detailed questions about my life, my work, my interests, as if trying to piece together the puzzle of the woman I'd become in his absence. I found myself relaxing, remembering why I'd always enjoyed his company as a child. He listened intently, asked insightful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Papadopoulos, a distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Family has arrived. This is good, he said in accented English. Mr. Reynolds needs support for recovery. This is my granddaughter, Morgan, Harold said, a note of pride in his voice that caught me by surprise. Dr. Papadopoulos nodded respectfully to me before turning back to Harold. We need to discuss your travel arrangements. The flight back to America will put significant strain on your heart. You will need medical supervision and proper equipment. I've already arranged for the company jet to be fitted with medical equipment, Harold said. Actually, Evelyn interjected, there's been a complication with that plan. Both Harold and I turned to her. James has redirected the jet. It's currently in the Maldives, where he and Victoria decided to extend their vacation. Without even checking if his father had transportation home. I asked, incredulous. Evelyn's expression grew even more uncomfortable. There's more, I'm afraid. The hospital has been trying to process Mr. Reynolds' medical expenses, but his emergency account access has been restricted. The payments have been declined. Harold's face darkened. That's impossible. James has signature authority on those accounts specifically for emergencies like this. I've been working with the bank, Evelyn said. It appears the access was changed last week. Your accounts have been frozen pending what the bank called a review of competency. The implications hung heavily in the air. My father hadn't just abandoned his father physically, he was financially isolating him as well. I'll cover the hospital expenses, I said immediately, though I knew the bill would likely deplete most of my savings. Absolutely not, Harold protested. It's already done, I said firmly. And I'm staying to make sure you get home safely, whether that's on a commercial flight with medical supervision or another solution. I stepped into the hallway to call my father, my hand shaking with barely contained fury as I dialed. He answered on the fourth ring, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses in the background. Morgan? This is unexpected. His voice was casual, as if we were catching up after running into each other at a coffee shop. How could you leave him there? I demanded without preamble. A pause, then, he's fine. The doctor said so. He had a heart attack. And now I find out you've frozen his accounts? What are you playing at? That's a temporary measure. For his own protection. My father's voice took on the condescending tone he'd always used when he thought I was being unreasonable. Look, your grandfather is getting older. His decision-making isn't what it used to be. Victoria and I are just making sure he doesn't get taken advantage of. By whom? The hospital trying to treat him? The only person taking advantage here is you. You don't understand the complexities of the situation. Then explain them to me. Better yet, get on a plane and come explain them to your father. That's not possible right now. We have commitments. In the background, I heard Victoria's voice. Is that Morgan? Tell her to mind her own business. I have to go, my father said. Don't worry about coming back, I replied coldly. I'll make sure grandfather gets home safely, no thanks to you. After hanging up, I leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths to compose myself before returning to Harold's room. I found him examining some paperwork with Evelyn, his expression grim. We need to get back to the States as soon as possible, he said when he saw me. Things are worse than I thought. I've been looking into medical transport options, Evelyn said. There's a service that specializes in international medical repatriation, but the soonest they can accommodate us is 3 days from now. I nodded decisively. Then that's the plan. I'll stay with you until then, grandfather, and we'll travel home together. Harold looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, gratitude mixed with something that might have been regret. Thank you, Morgan, he said simply. 3 days later, as our medical transport plane lifted off from Santorini, I glanced at my grandfather. Despite the circumstances, there was determination in his eyes that told me this was just the beginning of whatever was coming next. The journey back to the United States was tense and exhausting. Harold required supplemental oxygen during the flight, and though he tried to hide it, I could see the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. The medical staff accompanying us monitored him constantly, administering medication when his blood pressure spiked or his heartbeat became erratic. During the rare moments when he slept, I stared out the window at the vast Atlantic below, trying to make sense of what was happening. Why would my father go to such lengths? James Reynolds had always been self-centered, but this level of calculated cruelty seemed extreme even for him. When we finally landed in New York, a medical transport was waiting to take us to Harold's estate in Westchester County. I expected the sprawling mansion to be bustling with staff and family members concerned about the master of the house returning from a medical emergency. Instead, we were greeted by an eerie silence. "Where is everyone?" I asked Evelyn as we helped Harold settle into his bedroom suite. "Most of the household staff were given indefinite leave last week," she replied, her tone carefully neutral. "Bye, James." Harold, looking more alert now that he was back on familiar territory, straightened against his pillows. "Evelyn, please call Dominic Bennett and ask him to come immediately." "Who's Dominic Bennett?" I asked after Evelyn left to make the call. "My lawyer," Harold said grimly. "And one of the few people I still trust completely." 3 hours later, I was sitting in Harold's wood-paneled study, trying to process what Dominic Bennett had just revealed. A distinguished man in his mid-50s with keen eyes and a deliberate manner of speaking, the lawyer had brought with him a leather portfolio full of documents that told a disturbing story. "So you're saying my father has been systematically draining grandfather's accounts for years?" I clarified, the stack of bank statements in front of me showing millions of dollars in questionable transfers. "Not just draining them," Bennett corrected. "He's been moving assets, changing ownership structures, and inserting himself as the controlling authority in multiple business entities." "But how could he do that without your knowledge?" I asked Harold. My grandfather's expression was a mixture of anger and shame. "I trusted him. After your grandmother died 5 years ago, I gave James increased responsibility in the business. He's my son. I never imagined he would." His voice trailed off. Bennett laid another document on the desk. "This is the most concerning development. It's a petition for conservatorship, prepared but not yet filed. James has been gathering evidence of Harold's supposed mental decline, including manipulated videos and statements from medical professionals who have never actually examined him." "The Greece trip," I said suddenly, the pieces clicking together. "It wasn't a vacation, was it?" Harold shook his head slowly. "I see that now. James insisted on that yacht excursion despite the doctor warning me against too much sun exposure with my new heart medication. He kept pushing me to overexert myself, always with Victoria documenting everything on her phone. They were trying to trigger a medical episode. And then leave you there," I finished, feeling sick. "They never intended to bring you home. The plan appears to have been to leave Mr. Reynolds in Greece long enough to establish that he couldn't manage his own affairs," Bennett confirmed. "With the right judge and the documentation they've been fabricating, they could have pushed through an emergency conservatorship in his absence." Harold's hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles white. "My own son tried to." He couldn't finish the sentence. I moved to sit beside him, placing my hand over his. For a moment, we sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude of the betrayal. "What do we do now?" I finally asked Bennett. "First, we need to secure what assets we still can. I've already started the process of revoking James's power of attorney. Second, we document everything to build our case against any conservatorship attempt. And third," he looked at me intently, "we need to keep Harold safe." "I'm staying," I said immediately, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "I'll work remotely for as long as necessary." Harold turned to me, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You would do that? After I let James push you out of my life for all these years?" The question pierced me. "What do you mean, let James push me out?" My grandfather seemed to age another decade before my eyes. After your parents' divorce, James threatened to cut all ties with me if I maintained any relationship with you or your mother. I thought. I thought by giving him what he wanted, I could keep him close, guide him to be better. A bitter laugh escaped him. Instead, I lost you and created a monster. The revelation should have angered me, but instead, I felt an unexpected wave of compassion. Harold had made a terrible choice, but he had been manipulated by his own son, just as I had been. We have the chance to fix that now, I said quietly. And to stop him from taking everything you built. Bennett cleared his throat. There's one more thing you should see. He handed Harold a flash drive. My investigator found this in Victoria's cloud storage. It was accidentally synced from her phone. Harold plugged it into his laptop, and a video began to play. It showed Victoria and James in what appeared to be a hotel room, glasses of champagne in hand. To the soon-to-be richest couple in New York, James toasted, clinking his glass against Victoria's. How long do you think the old man will last in that Greek hospital? Victoria asked, her smile predatory. James shrugged. Who cares? By the time anyone realizes he's still there, we'll have control of everything. The papers just need his signature, or a reasonable facsimile. He laughed. To dear old Dad, may he enjoy his Mediterranean retirement. The video ended, and Harold closed the laptop slowly, his expression unreadable. I'd like to rest now, he said, his voice hollow. After helping him back to his bedroom, I returned to the study where Bennett was organizing documents. Is there enough evidence to press charges? I asked. Criminal charges would be complicated and drawn out, Bennett replied. But we have more than enough to defeat any conservatorship attempt and potentially sue for financial restitution. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Rachel. How's it going with long-lost grandpa? Need backup? I realized I hadn't told anyone except Michael the full story. Quickly, I typed, it's worse than I thought. My father has been trying to steal grandfather's fortune and leave him stranded overseas. Her response was immediate. Holy shit. What can I do? Just knowing you're there helps, I replied honestly. I'm staying at grandfather's for now. Will fill you in when I can. As I put my phone away, I noticed a framed photo on the bookshelf that I hadn't seen before. It showed me at my high school graduation, smiling in cap and gown. I'd never sent this to my grandfather. He has a whole album, Evelyn said softly from the doorway, making me jump. School photos, newspaper clippings about your academic achievements, even the announcement when you opened your practice. He may not have been in your life, Morgan, but you were always in his. That night, as I settled into a guest suite larger than my entire apartment, I felt the weight of responsibility settling over me. I was now the only thing standing between my grandfather and the son who wanted to destroy him. I had been staying with Harold for just over a week, settling into a routine of morning meetings with Bennett, afternoons helping Harold with his recovery exercises, and evenings working remotely with my patients via video calls. My temporary absence from my practice had raised eyebrows, but my colleagues had been understanding once I explained it was a family health emergency. Harold was improving daily, his natural vigor returning as he focused on fighting back against James's machinations. Bennett had successfully reversed some of the most recent asset transfers and restored Harold's access to his primary accounts, though millions remained tied up in complex legal structures that James had created. I was reviewing some financial documents in the study when Evelyn burst in, her usual composure shattered. They're here, she said, breathless. James, Victoria, and Nathan just pulled up to the main gate. My stomach dropped. Did they call ahead? No. They're demanding entry now. Harold, who had been napping, appeared in the doorway, leaning on his cane, but standing straighter than he had since his heart attack. Let them in, Evelyn. It's time we had this out in the open. Are you sure that's wise? I asked, concerned about the strain on his heart. A grim smile touched his lips. I've spent too many years avoiding confrontation with my son. Look where that got us. 15 tense minutes later, the study door burst open, and James strode in as if he owned the place, which, I realized with a chill, he had been positioning himself to do. At 53, my father still cut an imposing figure, tall, expensively dressed, with the same Reynolds blue eyes that both Harold and I shared. Behind him came Victoria, glamorous as ever in designer clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her blonde hair styled in a perfect bob. And trailing them both was Nathan, my half-brother, looking uncomfortable in a way that surprised me. "Well, isn't this cozy?" James said, his gaze moving from Harold to me with barely concealed contempt. "The prodigal granddaughter returns." "James," Harold acknowledged coldly. "I don't recall inviting you here." "I don't need an invitation to my future home," James replied smoothly. "We were concerned when you disappeared from the hospital in Greece. Very reckless of you to travel against medical advice." "Concerned?" I couldn't help interjecting. "Is that why you redirected his private jet and left him stranded?" Victoria stepped forward, her expression a masterpiece of false concern. "Morgan, dear, you don't understand the complexities of your grandfather's condition. We've been consulting with specialists who all agree he needs supervised care." "How strange that none of these specialists have actually examined him," I responded. "We need to speak to Harold alone," James cut in. "Family business." "Morgan is family," Harold said firmly. "She hasn't been family for 10 years, James snapped. "She shows up the minute she smells money, and you welcome her with open arms." "I came because my grandfather had a heart attack and was abandoned in a foreign country by his son," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "Unlike some people, I actually care about more than his bank accounts." Victoria's perfectly composed face tightened. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Harold has been making concerning decisions lately. We're just trying to protect him." "By emptying his accounts? By filing false medical reports?" Harold's voice thundered with a strength that belied his recent illness. "By conspiring to leave me stranded in Greece while you seized control of everything I've built." James blanched slightly. "Who's been filling your head with these paranoid delusions? This is exactly why we're concerned." "They're not delusions when we have the evidence, James." Harold nodded to me, and I retrieved the folder Bennett had prepared. "Financial records showing systematic theft," I said, laying out the first document. "Falsified medical evaluations from doctors who've never met grandfather." Another paper joined the first. "And my personal favorite, video footage of you and Victoria toasting to Harold's Mediterranean retirement while you forged his signatures." The blood drained from James's face. "Where did you get that?" "You really should be more careful about what Victoria syncs to her cloud storage," I said. Victoria's eyes flashed with sudden panic. "James, they're bluffing." "Actually, we're not," Harold said, turning his laptop to show the frozen image of their toast. "Would you like to hear the part where you discuss how long I might last in the Greek hospital, or should we skip ahead to your plans for my art collection?" Nathan, who had remained silent by the door, stepped forward. "Dad? What is this?" James ignored his son, his face contorting with fury. "You think you've won? I'll contest everything. I'll have you declared incompetent. No court will side with a man who had a heart attack over his devoted son." "A devoted son who abandoned his father in a foreign hospital," I pointed out. "I had pressing business matters," James shouted. "Yes, the pressing business of stealing my company while I was incapacitated," Harold replied coldly. "It's over, James. Dominic has already filed the paperwork revoking your power of attorney, and the board has been notified of your unauthorized activities." Victoria surged forward, her careful facade cracking to reveal the calculating woman beneath. "You ungrateful old fool. After everything we've done, playing the dutiful family, attending those boring charity events, listening to your endless stories. You owe us." "I owe you nothing," Harold said, rising to his feet with dignity. "And you are no longer welcome in my home." "This isn't over," James hissed. "I'll fight you with every lawyer I can find. When I'm done, you won't have a penny left." Harold calmly pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Security, please escort Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds from the property. They are no longer welcome here." Two men in suits appeared almost immediately, positioning themselves at the door. James's face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this. Both of you." He stormed toward the door, Victoria close behind. Nathan, however, hesitated. "Grandfather, he started, then faltered, looking between his parents and Harold. "Nathan, now!" James barked. My half-brother flinched, but stood his ground. I want to hear his side. There's nothing to hear. Victoria grabbed his arm. He's being manipulated by her. She jerked her head toward me. Nathan pulled his arm free. I was there in Greece, Mom. I saw you and Dad leave Grandfather at the hospital. It didn't feel right then, and it doesn't feel right now. If you stay, don't bother coming home, James threatened. For a moment, Nathan wavered, and I felt a surprising surge of sympathy for my half-brother. At 22, he was caught between family loyalty and his own moral compass. I'll get my things later, Nathan finally said, stepping away from his parents. James's face hardened. You're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. The only mistake would be continuing to ignore what I've been seeing right in front of me, Nathan replied quietly. After security escorted James and Victoria out, an awkward silence fell over the study. Nathan stood uncertainly, looking lost in his expensive clothes. Thank you, Harold finally said to him. That couldn't have been easy. Nathan shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see what was happening. I studied my half-brother, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Despite our shared blood, we'd never had a relationship. I'd always seen him as an extension of James and Victoria, privileged, entitled, and dismissive. But the young man standing before us now seemed different, conflicted and genuinely disturbed by his parents' actions. You're welcome to stay here while you figure things out, I found myself saying. Nathan looked at me with surprise. You'd be okay with that? After how my parents treated you? You're not your parents, I said simply. Harold nodded in agreement. There's plenty of room. And I'd like the chance to get to know my grandson properly. After Nathan excused himself to process everything that had happened, I turned to Harold. Are you all right? That was intense. Harold sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 78 years. I should have confronted him years ago. Maybe things would never have gotten this far. I placed my hand on his shoulder. You can't blame yourself for trusting your son. Can't I? Harold's voice was heavy with regret. I enabled him, Morgan. I overlooked his flaws, made excuses for his behavior, and pushed aside anyone who tried to warn me, including you. We can't change the past, I said gently. But we can make sure he doesn't win now. My phone buzzed with a message from Michael. How did the confrontation go? Quickly, I typed back. James and Victoria kicked out. Surprisingly, Nathan stayed. More later. Harold noticed my distraction. Your young man checking in. I nodded, feeling a flush rise to my cheeks. He's been very supportive through all this. I'd like to meet him someday, Harold said, a hint of his old humor returning. I should know the man who's capturing my granddaughter's heart. The moment of levity was interrupted by Evelyn rushing in, her face grave. Mr. Bennett just called. James has filed for an emergency conservatorship hearing. It's scheduled for next week. Harold's expression hardened. Then we'd better be ready for him. As I left the study to call Bennett for details, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. The confrontation had been just the opening salvo. The real battle was yet to come. The next few days brought a whirlwind of attacks from James and Victoria. First came the news articles in local publications, featuring quotes from sources close to the family about Harold's alleged mental decline. Then came the anonymous complaints to the state licensing board about my professional conduct, suggesting I was taking advantage of an elderly relative. This is ridiculous, I fumed, pacing Harold's study with my phone in hand, displaying an article titled Reynolds' Empire in Jeopardy as Patriarch Shows Signs of Decline. James has always had friends in media, Harold said wearily. And Victoria is a master at managing public perception. Evelyn entered with a tablet displaying a social media post from Victoria, a carefully curated throwback photo of James helping Harold walk on a beach, with a caption expressing concern about watching a once great man struggle with age and confused decision-making. The comments are brutal, Evelyn noted. People suggesting you're being manipulated, that James is just trying to protect his father's legacy. Social media jury already convicting us, I muttered. How can they be so convincing when they're lying through their teeth? Because they've been building this narrative for years, Harold replied. Every holiday gathering, every public event, They've been crafting the image of the devoted son and his supportive wife caring for the aging patriarch. A soft knock interrupted us. Nathan stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" Over the past days, my half-brother had kept mostly to himself, clearly struggling with his decision to break from his parents. Now, he approached hesitantly, holding his phone. "Mom's been texting me nonstop," he said, showing us the screen filled with messages ranging from guilt-tripping to outright threats. "And Dad called to say they're offering me a deal. If I testify about grandfather's confused behavior during our Greece trip, they'll make sure I'm taken care of financially regardless of how the conservatorship battle ends." "Are you considering it?" Harold asked quietly. Nathan looked offended. "No, that's why I'm showing you. I thought you should know how far they're willing to go." I studied my half-brother, still not entirely convinced of his loyalty. "Why the change of heart, Nathan? You've been part of their world your entire life." He sank into a chair, suddenly looking much younger than his 22 years. "In Greece, when grandfather collapsed on the yacht, I wanted to stay with him at the hospital. Dad said it wasn't necessary, that the doctors had everything under control. But the look on grandfather's face when we left." He shook his head. "I've never seen anyone look so betrayed. That night at the hotel, I overheard Mom and Dad talking about making sure grandfather stayed in Greece until everything was in place. It didn't make sense then, but it does now." My phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was an unknown number. "Morgan Reynolds," a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Lindsay Parker. I was Victoria's personal assistant. We need to talk." An hour later, Lindsay was sitting in Harold's study, nervously twisting a USB drive between her fingers. In her early 30s, she had the sharp, observant look of someone who noticed everything and said little, the perfect assistant for someone like Victoria. "I've worked for Mrs. Reynolds for 3 years," she explained. "At first, it was just normal assistant stuff, managing her schedule, coordinating events, handling correspondence. But about a year ago, things changed. She started having me research medical conditions that mimic dementia and keep track of Mr. Reynolds' senior moments." "My father's?" I asked, confused. "No, your grandfather's." Any time he forgot a name or misplaced something, I had to document it. Victoria also had me edit videos of him, cutting out the middle of conversations to make him appear confused, splicing together statements to change their meaning. Harold's expression darkened. "And you did this willingly?" Lindsay flushed with shame. "I needed the job. But when I found out they'd left you in that hospital in Greece." She pushed the USB drive across the table. "This contains everything. Their plans, the original unedited videos, emails between them, and the doctors they paid for false evaluations." Victoria kept meticulous records. I picked up the drive. "Why are you giving us this now?" "Because they crossed a line," Lindsay said firmly. "And because they fired me yesterday when they found out I'd expressed concerns to their attorney about the ethics of what they were doing." On my way out, Victoria threatened to make sure I never worked in New York again if I spoke to anyone. A small, defiant smile crossed her face. I decided that was one threat I wasn't going to let stand. After Bennett arrived to take Lindsay's formal statement, I retreated to the garden to call Rachel and finally fill her in on everything that had happened. "This is like a movie," she exclaimed after I finished. "The evil son trying to steal his father's fortune, you swooping in to save the day." "It doesn't feel heroic," I admitted, watching a pair of cardinals flit among the roses. "It feels exhausting and heartbreaking." "That's my father doing these horrible things." "No," Rachel said firmly. "That's a man who happens to share your DNA. He stopped being a father to you long ago." Her words struck a chord. "You're right. It's just difficult to reconcile the dad I remember from childhood with this person who would abandon his own father and try to steal his fortune." "People show you who they are through their actions," Rachel said. "And his actions have been pretty clear." Later that evening, as I was reviewing documentation with Bennett in preparation for the conservatorship hearing, Harold suffered another minor health scare. His blood pressure spiking dangerously high after a particularly stressful phone call with the board of his company. "This is exactly what James wants," I said as I helped Harold take his medication. The stress of fighting him is putting your health at risk. I won't give him the satisfaction of breaking me, Harold replied stubbornly. I called Dr. Papadopoulos in Greece for a consultation, and he adjusted Harold's medication remotely, warning that continued stress could lead to another cardiac event. Your grandfather needs calm and stability, he emphasized. This legal battle is the opposite of what I would prescribe for recovery. That night, as Michael and I talked on video chat, I finally broke down. I don't know if I can do this, I confessed, tears streaming down my face. What if we lose the hearing? What if the stress kills him before we even get there? What if Nathan is playing us and feeding information back to James? Morgan, Michael said gently, you're catastrophizing. Take a breath and remember, you're not alone in this. Harold has Bennett, Evelyn, and you, probably the strongest team he could ask for. His steady presence, even through a screen, calmed me. I wish you were here. I can be, if you need me, he offered immediately. My patients would understand. No, you're right. I'm not alone. I wiped my eyes. I just need to keep it together until the hearing. The next morning, Harold asked me to join him for breakfast on the terrace, something we'd started doing regularly as he regained his strength. As we ate, he seemed contemplative. There's something I never told you, he finally said. About why I stayed away after your parents' divorce. I set down my coffee cup. You said James threatened to cut ties if you maintained a relationship with me. That was part of it, Harold nodded. But not all. James also threatened your mother's financial security. The divorce settlement was generous, but he had clauses inserted that would reduce payments if I had any contact with you or your mother. I stared at him, stunned. He financially blackmailed both of you. Your mother never knew. She just thought I had chosen James's side. Harold's eyes were filled with regret. I should have fought him then. Instead, I convinced myself I was protecting both of you by staying away. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know the kind of man your father really is, Harold said. And because I want you to understand that what's happening now didn't come from nowhere. I enabled James for decades, making excuses for his behavior, never holding him accountable. This is as much my failure as his. As we sat in silence, processing this painful truth, my phone buzzed with an alert. It was from Bennett. Emergency conservatorship hearing moved up. Court tomorrow at 9 a.m. Harold read the message over my shoulder and straightened his shoulders. It seems James has friends in the court system as well. We're not ready, I said, panic rising. Bennett said we needed at least a week to prepare all the evidence. Then we'll work through the night, Harold replied with determination. I didn't build a billion-dollar company by crumbling under pressure. As we hurried inside to call Bennett, I felt a strange mix of dread and resolve. Tomorrow would determine not just Harold's future, but the fate of our newly reconnected family. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, the wood-paneled walls and formal atmosphere adding to the tension that hung in the air. Harold sat beside me at the respondent's table, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that disguised his recent weight loss. Across the aisle, James and Victoria presented a united front, both wearing expressions of practiced concern. Our legal team, led by Dominic Bennett, was reviewing last-minute documents when the bailiff called the court to order. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s named Judge Eleanor Winters, took her seat and surveyed the room with shrewd eyes. This is an emergency hearing regarding petition case number 2023 CV 4872 in the matter of Harold Reynolds, she announced. I understand the petitioner is seeking temporary conservatorship pending a full hearing. Is that correct? James's attorney, a slick man named Gregory Palmer, stood. Yes, Your Honor. We're seeking temporary conservatorship of both the person and estate of Harold Reynolds due to concerning patterns of cognitive decline and vulnerability to undue influence. And the respondent contests this petition? Judge Winters looked to our table. Bennett rose. Vigorously, Your Honor. Not only do we contest the petition as entirely without merit, but we contend it represents a coordinated attempt by the petitioner to seize control of Mr. Reynolds' substantial assets through fraudulent means. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Those are serious allegations, Mr. Bennett, the judge remarked. I hope you have evidence to support them. Substantial evidence, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Very well. Mr. Palmer, please present your case. What followed was a masterclass in manipulative presentation. James's attorney painted a picture of Harold as an increasingly confused man making erratic decisions, with James as the concerned son trying to protect his father's legacy. They presented carefully edited videos showing Harold appearing to forget names or lose his train of thought, along with statements from doctors who had never actually examined Harold, expressing serious concerns based on the behaviors described to them. Victoria took the stand, delivering a tearful performance about her fear for Harold's well-being. "He's not the same man anymore," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Last month, he couldn't remember his own grandson's birthday. And then this impulsive trip to Greece, against medical advice." "And what happened in Greece, Mrs. Reynolds?" Palmer prompted. "He had a heart attack, just as his doctors had warned might happen if he overtaxed himself. And then, instead of returning home with us for proper care, he allowed himself to be influenced by his estranged granddaughter, who suddenly appeared after a decade of absence." Victoria gave me a pointed look. "Now he's turned against his own son, who has only ever tried to protect him." Under cross-examination, Bennett tried to press Victoria on the details of their departure from Greece, but she had a ready answer. "The doctors assured us he was stable, and James had an unavoidable business emergency. We planned to return immediately, but by then, Morgan had taken control of everything." As Victoria stepped down, I leaned over to Bennett. "She's twisting everything." "That's why we saved our strongest evidence for rebuttal," he whispered back. "Let them present their entire false narrative first." James took the stand next, playing the role of the dutiful son with practiced precision. He spoke about gradual changes he'd noticed in his father: increased irritability, forgetfulness, impulsive spending decisions. The last straw was when he fired 3 longtime board members without consulting anyone and tried to appoint unqualified replacements, James said solemnly. "When we expressed concern, he became paranoid, accusing us of trying to steal from him. It's heartbreaking to watch." "And what about the allegations that you abandoned your father in Greece?" Bennett asked during cross-examination. James's expression hardened momentarily before settling back into concerned son mode. "As I've said, we left only after confirming he was stable and receiving excellent care. We had every intention of returning within days. The notion that we abandoned him is simply false." As their parade of witnesses continued, including medical experts testifying about hypothetical symptoms they'd never actually observed in Harold, I felt my anxiety growing. They presented a compelling, if entirely fabricated, case. Finally, it was our turn. Bennett started with a bombshell. "Your Honor, before I call our first witness, I'd like to submit into Evidence Exhibit A, unedited versions of the videos the petitioner has presented, showing how they were manipulated to create a false impression of Mr. Reynolds' mental state." He played side-by-side comparisons on the courtroom's monitor. In the original footage, Harold's responses were clear and coherent. In the edited versions, his pauses were extended and responses from others removed to make him appear confused. James leaned over to whisper urgently to his attorney, his face flushing. "Dr. Elias Papadopoulos was our first witness, having flown in overnight from Greece." "Dr. Papadopoulos, you treated Mr. Reynolds after his heart attack in Santorini, correct?" Bennett asked. "Yes, I was his attending physician." "And in your professional assessment, did Mr. Reynolds display any signs of cognitive impairment or confusion beyond what would be normal for someone recovering from a cardiac event?" "Absolutely not," Dr. Papadopoulos stated firmly. Mr. Reynolds was lucid, oriented, and completely capable of making his own medical decisions. In fact, he demonstrated remarkable clarity given the circumstances. "And what can you tell us about the circumstances of his family's departure from Greece?" Dr. Papadopoulos's expression darkened. I was shocked. Mr. Reynolds had just suffered a significant cardiac event, was in a foreign country where he didn't speak the language, and his son announced they were leaving for another island. I specifically advised against it, explaining that Mr. Reynolds needed family support, but Mr. James Reynolds said they had other commitments that couldn't be changed. Palmer tried to discredit Dr. Papadopoulos on cross-examination, suggesting he hadn't spent enough time with Harold to make a proper assessment, but the doctor held firm. Our next surprise witness was Lindsay Parker, Victoria's former assistant. She entered the courtroom visibly nervous but determined, avoiding Victoria's glare as she took the stand. "Ms. Parker, what was your role in the Reynolds household?" Bennett asked. "I was Mrs. Reynolds' personal assistant for 3 years," Lindsay replied. "And did your duties ever involve anything related to the elder Mr. Reynolds' mental capacity?" Lindsay nodded. "About a year ago, Victoria instructed me to start documenting any instance where Harold seemed forgetful or confused, no matter how minor. She also had me edit videos of him to make his responses seem delayed or confused." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and Judge Winters had to call for order. "Ms. Parker, are you testifying that the petitioners deliberately fabricated evidence of mental decline?" the judge asked directly. "Yes, Your Honor. I was explicitly instructed to create a paper trail suggesting cognitive decline where none existed." Lindsay held up a thumb drive identical to the one she'd given us. "This contains all the original footage, along with emails between James and Victoria discussing their plan to have Harold declared incompetent." Victoria whispered furiously to James, who seemed to be struggling to maintain his composure. Then came the biggest surprise of all. Nathan approached the courtroom doors, hesitating until Bennett motioned him forward. "Your Honor, we call Nathan Reynolds as our next witness." James half rose from his seat. "Objection. My son was not on the witness list. He contacted us just this morning, Your Honor," Bennett explained. "As a direct witness to events in Greece, his testimony is highly relevant." "I'll allow it," Judge Winters ruled, "but I'll be watching closely for any signs of coaching." Nathan took the stand, looking uncomfortable but resolute. He detailed what he had witnessed in Greece: his grandfather's collapse, his father's insistence on leaving the hospital, and the conversations he had overheard afterward. "My parents thought I was asleep, but I heard them talking in their hotel room in Mykonos," he testified. "My father said something like, 'The old man will be fine where he is until we get things sorted out back home.' And my mother replied, 'As long as he stays there until the paperwork is filed.'" "And did you confront your parents about this conversation?" Bennett asked. "I tried to ask my father why we weren't going back to check on grandfather, and he told me to mind my own business, that adult matters were being handled." James's face had turned a dangerous shade of red. When Palmer attempted to cross-examine Nathan, the young man stood firm, even when questioned about potential motives for turning against his parents. "I'm not doing this for any gain," Nathan said evenly. "I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do." Finally, Harold himself took the stand. Despite his recent health challenges, he cut an impressive figure, answering questions with the sharp precision that had made him a business legend. "Mr. Reynolds," Bennett began, "could you tell the court about your relationship with your son in recent years?" Harold spoke candidly about how James had gradually inserted himself into every aspect of the business, how he had isolated Harold from other family members, including me, and how the Greece trip had been James's idea despite medical advice to the contrary. "I trusted my son," Harold said, his voice steady but tinged with sadness. "I wanted to believe in him even when the evidence suggested I shouldn't. It was only after he abandoned me in that hospital and Morgan came to my aid that I began to see the full extent of his betrayal." During Palmer's cross-examination, he tried to provoke Harold into an angry outburst, asking increasingly provocative questions about his business decisions and personal life. Harold remained calm and articulate, answering each question thoughtfully. When Palmer, growing frustrated, asked if Harold was so mentally sound, why hadn't he recognized his son's betrayal sooner, Harold delivered the most powerful moment of the hearing. "Love and trust can blind us, counselor," he said quietly. "I wanted to believe my son was the man I raised him to be, not the man he became. That's not mental incapacity, it's being a father. Something my son might understand if he'd ever put someone else's needs before his own." As the evidence mounted against them, James became increasingly agitated. During Bennett's closing statement, which methodically dismantled each of James's claims while highlighting the documented evidence of his scheme, James suddenly jumped to his feet. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "He's worth billions. Do you have any idea what he's sitting on? All that money just waiting for him to die, and he won't even support his own son properly." "Mr. Reynolds." Judge Winters banged her gavel. "Control yourself, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." "You don't understand," James continued, ignoring his attorney's attempts to quiet him. "I've put up with his controlling behavior for years, playing the dutiful son while he dangled his fortune like a carrot. I deserve that money. I've earned it." Victoria tugged desperately at his sleeve. "James, stop. You're ruining everything." The outburst confirmed everything we had been trying to prove, and I could see from the judge's expression that she had heard enough. "In light of the evidence presented and the petitioner's behavior in this courtroom, I am denying the emergency petition for conservatorship," Judge Winters declared after a brief recess. "Furthermore, I am issuing a temporary restraining order preventing James and Victoria Reynolds from contacting Harold Reynolds or accessing any of his financial accounts pending a full investigation into potential elder abuse and fraud." She looked directly at James. "Mr. Reynolds, I strongly suggest you retain separate criminal counsel. The evidence presented here today suggests potential criminal actions that I will be referring to the district attorney's office." As the judge left the courtroom, the full impact of our victory washed over me. Harold reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "Thank you," he said simply, his eyes bright with emotion. In the courthouse hallway, we were gathering our belongings when Victoria approached, her perfect composure finally cracked. "This isn't over," she hissed, keeping her voice low enough that only Harold and I could hear. "You have no idea what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," Harold replied calmly. "I've protected what's mine from those who would steal it. Including you, Victoria." "You're a fool," she spat. "James and I are the only ones who have stood by you all these years. That girl disappeared from your life for a decade, and now you're trusting her with everything." "Morgan came when I needed her," Harold said. "What does that tell you about who truly cares for me?" Victoria's face contorted with fury before she stormed off to where James was arguing with their attorney. Nathan approached us cautiously. "I'm sorry about everything they did. I should have spoken up sooner." "You spoke up when it mattered most," Harold told him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "That takes courage." As we left the courthouse together, I felt both triumphant and exhausted. The battle had been won, but I knew the war was far from over. James would not give up easily, and there would be consequences for all of us in the days to come. The weeks following the courthouse showdown brought sweeping changes. James and Victoria faced the legal ramifications of their actions, with the district attorney's office opening a formal investigation into elder abuse and financial fraud. Bank records revealed that they had diverted over $12 million from Harold's accounts over the past 3 years alone. I had extended my leave of absence from my practice indefinitely, working remotely with a few long-term patients while focusing primarily on helping Harold recover both physically and emotionally. We established a comfortable routine at the estate, with mornings spent discussing business matters and afternoons often spent simply talking, making up for the lost decade of our relationship. Nathan, meanwhile, had moved out of his parents' penthouse and into a modest apartment near Columbia University, where he had decided to return to finish his business degree that he had abandoned under pressure from James and Victoria to join the family business immediately. One morning, Harold called me into his study, where he was reviewing documents with Bennett. "Nathan has asked if he can come work for the company," he said without preamble. "Starting at entry level, no special treatment. What do you think?" I asked carefully, still harboring some residual caution about my half-brother despite his testimony on our behalf. Harold rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I think he deserves a chance to prove himself. But I wanted your input before I decided." The fact that he valued my opinion enough to consult me on family business decisions still surprised me. "I think people deserve the opportunity to show who they really are, separate from their parents' influence. But maybe start him somewhere you can keep an eye on him, just to be safe." Harold nodded. "That's what I was thinking. The marketing department needs an assistant, and the director is one of my most trusted employees." Later that day, I received a call from Bennett with news that James was attempting to negotiate a plea deal, offering to provide evidence against Victoria in exchange for reduced charges. He's turning on her already, I asked, though I shouldn't have been surprised. Victoria disappeared 3 days ago, Bennett informed me. Apparently, she emptied their joint accounts and boarded a private flight to a country with no extradition treaty. James is furious and looking to save himself. That evening, as Harold and I were having dinner on the terrace, Evelyn appeared with a message. James was at the gate, requesting to speak with Harold. He's alone, she added. Security checked. Harold set down his fork, his expression unreadable. I suppose this moment was inevitable. You don't have to see him, I said immediately. After everything he's done. I need to, Harold interrupted gently. For my own peace, if nothing else. Then I'm coming with you, I insisted. 20 minutes later, James was shown into the study. He looked diminished somehow, his expensive suit hanging a bit looser, dark circles under his eyes. The arrogance that had always characterized his demeanor was replaced by something approaching desperation. Dad, he acknowledged with a nod, then looked at me. Morgan. What do you want, James? Harold asked, his voice neutral. James sank uninvited into a chair. Victoria's gone. Took everything that wasn't frozen by the court and disappeared. I'm aware, Harold replied. Bennett told us. I need your help, James said, the words clearly difficult for him. The DA is pushing for maximum penalties. With your influence. You came here to ask me to help you avoid the consequences of trying to steal my entire fortune and leave me stranded in a foreign country. Harold's voice remained calm, but I could see his hands gripping the arms of his chair. James looked down. I know how it sounds. Do you? I couldn't help interjecting. Because it sounds like you're still only thinking about yourself. What would you have me do? James snapped, a flash of his old self emerging. Grovel? Beg forgiveness. I would have you take responsibility for once in your life, Harold said quietly. I would have you acknowledge the pain you've caused, not just to me, but to Morgan, to your own son. I would have you face the consequences of your actions without trying to manipulate your way out of them. James stared at his father for a long moment, then let out a bitter laugh. You know, I convinced myself for years that you were holding me back, that you didn't respect me enough to give me real control. I told myself that taking what was rightfully mine was justified. He shook his head. But it was never about respect, was it? You saw exactly who I was. I saw who you were becoming, Harold corrected. And I failed you by not confronting it sooner. An uncomfortable silence fell. I watched my father, this man who had abandoned me emotionally long before he physically left, and felt a complex mix of anger, pity, and grief for what might have been. I can't help you with the DA, Harold finally said. What you did was criminal, and justice must take its course. But I will ensure Nathan is taken care of, regardless of what happens to you. James nodded slowly, seeming to have expected this answer. And Victoria? If she's found, she'll face the same justice you do, Harold replied firmly. As James rose to leave, he paused, looking at me. I'm sorry, Morgan. For what it's worth. Which is what, exactly? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. You left me and Mom for Victoria, cut me out of your life, tried to keep grandfather away from me, and then attempted to steal his entire fortune. Which part are you sorry for? James had no answer, and after a moment, he turned and left without another word. After he was gone, I found myself unexpectedly emotional. I always thought if he ever apologized, I'd feel something different. Relief, maybe, or closure. But it just feels empty, Harold supplied. Because it wasn't a real apology. It was another attempt to get what he wanted. In the days that followed, we learned that Victoria had been located in Singapore and extradition proceedings had begun. James had accepted a plea deal that would send him to prison for 5 years, significantly less than the 15 he had been facing, in exchange for his testimony and full cooperation in recovering misappropriated funds. Nathan started work at Reynolds Enterprises, arriving early and staying late, clearly determined to prove himself on his own merits. Harold watched his progress from a distance, giving him space to find his own way while ensuring he had the support he needed. I began splitting my time between New York and Westchester, resuming some in-person sessions with patients while maintaining my close relationship with Harold. Michael visited regularly, and Harold took an immediate liking to him, the two often engaging in spirited discussions about everything from business ethics to baseball. One evening, about 6 months after the conservatorship hearing, Harold hosted a small dinner party. The guests included Bennett and his wife, Evelyn, Nathan, Michael, and me. As we enjoyed dessert on the terrace, Harold tapped his glass for attention. "I want to thank all of you," he said, his voice strong and clear. 6 months ago, I was lying in a hospital bed in Greece, believing I had been abandoned by everyone who mattered. Today, I'm surrounded by people who have proven their loyalty and love through actions, not just words. He looked at Nathan. "Some of us are rebuilding trust that was broken." Then at me. "Some of us are discovering connections we thought were lost forever." Finally, at Michael. "And some are new additions who have already become indispensable." Harold raised his glass. "Family isn't just about blood. It's about who stands by you in your darkest moments, who tells you the truth even when it's difficult to hear, and who helps you become the best version of yourself." As we all raised our glasses in response, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The family I had now wasn't the one I had been born into, but it was real and solid in a way my relationship with James had never been. Later that night, as Michael and I walked in the garden, he suddenly dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Morgan Reynolds," he said, opening the box to reveal a vintage emerald ring. "Will you marry me?" Stunned, I managed to whisper, "Yes," before pulling him to his feet and into a kiss. When we returned to the house, Harold was waiting in the study, a knowing smile on his face. "He asked for my blessing last week," he admitted. I told him it wasn't mine to give, that you're a woman who makes her own decisions, but that he had my wholehearted approval nonetheless. As I showed him the ring, his eyes grew misty. "It looks just like the one I gave your grandmother." Michael asked if he could have it redesigned for you. The realization that my engagement ring carried that family history moved me deeply. "Thank you for being here for this," I told Harold. "For being here for everything these past months." "It is I who should be thanking you, Morgan," he replied. "You gave me back something I thought was lost forever: faith in family." The next morning, I found Harold on his favorite terrace overlooking the gardens, already dressed for the office despite it being Saturday. "Big plans today?" I asked, joining him with my coffee. "Actually, yes," he replied. "I've been thinking about establishing a foundation focused on preventing elder abuse and financial exploitation. Too many seniors don't have someone like you to step in when they're vulnerable." "That's a wonderful idea," I said sincerely. "I was hoping you might help develop the psychological support aspects," he continued. "Your professional expertise would be invaluable." As we sat together planning this new venture, I realized how far we had come from that desperate phone call about an abandoned old man in a Greek hospital. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed Harold had ultimately led to healing wounds I thought would never close, creating a family bond stronger than blood ties alone could ever be. 6 months after the courtroom victory, life had settled into a new normal that none of us could have predicted a year earlier. Harold's health had improved dramatically, his color returned and his energy levels nearly back to his pre-heart attack state. His doctors attributed the improvement not just to his medication regimen, but to the removal of the chronic stress James and Victoria had caused. I had found a balance between my clinical practice in the city and my new role helping Harold develop the Reynolds Foundation for Elder Protection. 3 days a week, I saw patients. The other 2, I worked with Harold and a team of experts to create resources for vulnerable seniors and their families. Nathan had proven himself a dedicated worker, starting each day in the marketing department mailroom and staying late to learn every aspect of the business. Unlike his father, he seemed genuinely interested in earning his place rather than expecting it to be handed to him. One crisp autumn morning, Harold called Nathan and me to his office at Reynolds Enterprises headquarters. The corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan had always intimidated me as a child during my rare visits. Now, it felt like a familiar second home. "I've been thinking," Harold began once we were seated, "about the future of the company." Nathan shifted nervously in his chair, clearly uncertain where this was going. Neither of you has expressed any desire to take over as CEO when I eventually step down, Harold continued. Nathan, you're still learning the business from the ground up, which I respect enormously. And Morgan, your passion clearly lies in psychology and helping others. Are you planning to retire? I asked, surprised. Harold had always seemed like the type to work until his last day. Not immediately, he chuckled. But the heart attack was a way-up call. I need to ensure there's a solid succession plan in place. He slid folders across the desk to each of us. I've restructured the company's ownership. Morgan, as my granddaughter, you'll receive 30% of voting shares. Nathan, you'll also receive 30%. The remaining 40% will be divided among long-term executives who have proven their loyalty and business acumen. Nathan looked stunned. But I haven't earned this yet. Harold smiled approvingly at his response. The shares will be held in trust for 5 years while you complete a comprehensive training program I've designed. If at the end of that period you've demonstrated the necessary skills and commitment, the shares become yours outright. And if I don't? Nathan asked. Then they revert to the foundation, Harold replied simply. But I have faith in you, Nathan. You're not your father. Those words seemed to affect Nathan deeply. He blinked rapidly, composing himself. I won't let you down. Later that afternoon, Bennett arrived with news. James had been sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for fraud, tax evasion, and attempted elder abuse. Victoria, after a protracted legal battle, had been extradited from Singapore and was awaiting trial. James asked if you would visit him, Bennett told Harold. He says he wants to make amends. Harold was quiet for a moment. Perhaps someday. Not yet. As fall turned to winter, we received occasional updates about James. He was teaching business classes to other inmates, had joined a prison meditation group, and was, according to his counselor, showing genuine remorse for his actions. Whether this represented true change or was another manipulation remained to be seen. Victoria, meanwhile, had turned on James completely during her trial, claiming she had been coerced into the scheme. The jury didn't believe her, and she was sentenced to 8 years, longer than James, because of her flight to avoid prosecution. One snowy December evening, Michael and I were having dinner with Harold when he surprised us with an announcement. I've decided to offer funding to 10 deserving psychology students who want to specialize in elder care, he said. The Morgan Reynolds Scholarship. Grandfather, you don't have to. I want to, he interrupted gently. You've shown me the power of psychological support in healing from trauma. More seniors should have access to that kind of help. As we planned the scholarship details, I marveled at how Harold had transformed his own painful experience into something that would help others, a lesson in resilience I hoped to remember in my own practice. The new year brought another development. Nathan met a young woman named Emma at a volunteer event for the foundation. Unlike the socialites Victoria had always pushed him toward, Emma was a dedicated social worker who challenged Nathan's thinking and encouraged his growing independence from his parents' values. She doesn't care about the Reynolds name or money, Nathan confided to me one day as we walked through Central Park. She actually argued with me last night about wealth inequality. It was refreshing. Sounds like she's good for you, I observed. She reminds me of you, actually, he continued thoughtfully. Not afraid to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. I was touched by the comparison, our relationship having evolved from awkward half-siblings to something approaching genuine friendship. I'm happy for you, Nathan. You deserve someone who sees the real you. By spring, Harold had fully implemented his succession plan at Reynolds Enterprises, gradually stepping back from day-to-day operations while maintaining strategic oversight. The foundation was thriving, already helping dozens of seniors who had faced exploitation similar to what Harold had experienced. Michael and I set our wedding date for the following fall, choosing the gardens of Harold's estate as our venue. The planning brought joy to all of us, giving Harold a family celebration to look forward to after years of manipulated holiday gatherings with James and Victoria. One unusually warm April afternoon, Harold and I sat on his favorite terrace, watching gardeners prepare flower beds for summer blooming. I received another letter from James yesterday, Harold said, breaking our comfortable silence. He's been writing monthly. Have you read them? I asked. Harold had previously left James's letters unopened. I read this one, he admitted. He seems different. More reflective. He wrote about remembering fishing trips we took when he was a boy, before money and status became his focus. Do you believe he's changed? Harold sighed. I don't know. People can change, certainly. But trust, once broken so completely. He shook his head. I'm not ready to let him back into our lives. Perhaps someday, but not yet. That's fair, I agreed. Healing happens on your timeline, not his. What about you? Harold asked gently. Have you found any peace regarding your relationship with him? I considered the question carefully. I've accepted that the father I needed him to be doesn't exist. That's been freeing in its own way. I don't carry the hope anymore that he'll suddenly become that person. Harold nodded understanding. Sometimes the hardest part of healing is letting go of the relationship we wished we had. As summer arrived, the foundation launched a national awareness campaign about elder financial abuse, featuring Harold's story alongside others. His willingness to publicly share his experience, how his own son had betrayed him, was both brave and impactful, bringing attention to an issue often hidden by shame and family loyalty. Nathan continued to excel at work, his natural business acumen emerging as he gained experience. Emma had become a regular at family gatherings, her practical perspective and genuine warmth winning everyone over. In August, an unexpected visitor arrived at the estate, Lindsay Parker, Victoria's former assistant who had provided crucial evidence in our case. I wanted to thank you personally, she told Harold when we received her in the study. The Foundation's resources helped my grandmother avoid a similar scheme last month. If I hadn't learned the warning signs from working on your case, she might have lost everything. That's precisely why we created the Foundation, Harold replied warmly. To turn our experience into protection for others. As fall approached and wedding preparations intensified, Michael surprised me with an addition to our ceremony. I've asked Harold to be my groomsman, he revealed one evening. I would have asked him to be best man, but my brother would never forgive me. Tears welled in my eyes at the thought of my grandfather standing beside my future husband, officially becoming family in yet another way. The weekend before the wedding, Harold invited us all to a special dinner. Nathan and Emma, Michael and I, Evelyn, and even Bennett and his wife gathered around the dining table that had once hosted cold, tense family meals during James and Victoria's reign. A year ago, Harold began. Raising his glass, I thought I had lost everything that mattered, my health, my company, and my family. Instead, I discovered what true family really means. He looked around the table, his eyes bright with emotion. Morgan taught me that family isn't defined by obligation or blood alone, but by love and loyalty freely given. Nathan showed me that we can choose our path regardless of the examples set before us. And all of you have demonstrated that found family can be stronger than born family when those ties are poisoned by greed and manipulation. To chosen family, Michael proposed, raising his glass. To chosen family, we all echoed. After dinner, Harold asked me to join him for a walk in the garden. The evening was perfect, stars appearing in the darkening sky as a gentle breeze carried the scent of late summer roses. I have something for you, he said, withdrawing a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate sapphire necklace. It was your grandmother's, Harold explained. I've been saving it for the right moment. It's beautiful, I whispered, touching the gem gently. Like the necklace, our family legacy isn't just about material things, Harold said as he helped fasten it around my neck. It's about the values we pass on, the examples we set, the love we share. He took my hands in his. You saved more than my fortune when you came to Greece, Morgan. You saved my faith in family. That's a gift beyond measure. Standing there in the twilight garden, the sapphire resting against my collarbone, I felt a sense of completion. The journey that began with that desperate phone call had led to healing I never thought possible, not just for Harold, but for me as well. Family is a choice we make every day, I said, understanding the truth of it deep in my bones. And I'm grateful we chose each other. As we walked back toward the warmly lit house where the people we loved awaited us, I reflected on how the greatest betrayals sometimes open doors to the most profound connections, if we have the courage to walk through them. Thank you for taking this journey with me through my family's darkest time and brightest rebirth. Have you ever experienced betrayal that ultimately led to unexpected healing? Drop a comment below sharing your story. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that family is about loyalty and love, not just blood. Remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes the strongest foundation for our future.